In the lush, rolling hills of Beverly Hills, where luxury was the law and power was defined by sprawling estates and multi-million-dollar deals, there stood a mansion that seemed to pierce the sky. Its towering glass windows sparkled under the California sun, like finely cut diamonds, a bold symbol of success that turned heads and stirred envy in everyone who passed. This was the fortress of Jack Harmon, a man whose very name echoed through high-powered boardrooms, commanding respect, fear, and silent admiration. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I'm always curious to hear from you. Jack Harmon had it all, or so the world believed. His investment firm, Harmon Holdings, was a juggernaut in the financial world, gobbling up companies and spitting out profits with ruthless efficiency. Every decision he made seemed to turn to gold, his instincts honed to a razor's edge by years of cutthroat deals and sleepless nights. He was the man with the Midas touch, a modern-day king in a realm of high finance. But empires built on gold are often hollow at their core, and Jack's was no exception. As he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, gazing out at the manicured lawns and sparkling pool, a familiar emptiness gnawed at his insides. The view before him was perfect, too perfect. It was a life crafted for magazines and social media, a facade that hid the cracks in the foundation of his world. Jack's eyes drifted to a small silver picture frame on his desk. It was the only personal touch in a room otherwise dominated by sleek modern furniture and abstract art, chosen more for its value than its beauty. The photo within showed a younger version of himself, arms wrapped around a beautiful woman with laughing eyes, and a small boy perched on his shoulders. They were at the beach, their faces lit with genuine joy, the kind that couldn't be bought with all the money in the world. Emily, Ethan. The names echoed in his mind, stirring a mixture of longing and regret that he usually kept buried beneath spreadsheets and profit margins. Emily, his wife, or rather his ex-wife now, had left him 2 years ago, taking their son Ethan with her. The official reason was irreconcilable differences, but Jack knew the truth was far simpler and far more damning. He had chosen his empire over his family, and in doing so, he had lost them both. With a heavy sigh, Jack turned away from the window and the memories it evoked. He straightened his custom-tailored suit, a habit born of years in the spotlight, and prepared to face another day of conquests and acquisitions. But as he reached for the door handle, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reminder he had set months ago and promptly forgotten. Ethan's family day, 2 p.m. For a moment, Jack stood frozen, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Family day. The words seemed to mock him, a cruel reminder of what he had lost. He could almost hear Emily's voice, soft but firm. He's still your son, Jack. He needs you. But what did Jack Harmon, the man who could buy and sell companies on a whim, know about being a father? With a shake of his head, Jack pocketed his phone and strode out of the study. He had meetings to attend, deals to close. Family day would have to wait. It always did. As Jack's sleek black car pulled out of the driveway, driven by a stoic chauffeur who had long since learned not to engage in small talk, the mansion seemed to loom larger in the rearview mirror. Its perfect symmetry and flawless landscaping stood in stark contrast to the chaos of emotions swirling within its owner's chest. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom house that would have fit comfortably in Jack's garage, Emily Harmon stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in soapy water as she washed the breakfast dishes. The sound of cartoons drifted in from the living room, where 8-year-old Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes glued to the television screen. Emily glanced at her son, a small smile playing on her lips. Ethan had Jack's dark hair and strong jaw, but his eyes, those were all hers. Thoughtful, observant eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Sometimes when Ethan looked at her with those eyes, Emily felt as though he could see right through her carefully maintained composure to the uncertainty and longing that lay beneath. As she dried her hands on a dish towel, Emily's gaze fell on the calendar hanging on the fridge. Family Day was circled in red, a glaring reminder of the complexities that lay ahead. She had encouraged Jack to attend, hoping against hope that he would show up and prove her wrong, prove that he could be the father Ethan deserved. "Ethan, honey," she called, her voice gentle but tinged with a nervousness she couldn't quite hide. "It's time to get ready for school. Remember, today is Family Day." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Is Dad coming?" he asked, his voice small and hesitant. Emily's heart clenched at the hope in her son's voice. "I don't know, sweetie," she answered honestly. "But let's get you ready, just in case, okay?" As she helped Ethan button up his shirt and tie his shoes, Emily found herself lost in memories of happier times. Family picnics in the park, weekend trips to the beach, movie nights cuddled up on the couch, all seemed like scenes from another life now. A life before Jack's ambition had consumed him, before the late nights at the office had turned into missed dinners and forgotten promises. She remembered the day she had finally decided to leave, the culmination of years of loneliness and neglect. Jack had missed Ethan's birthday party, too caught up in closing a multi-million-dollar deal to remember his own son's special day. The look of disappointment on Ethan's face as he blew out the candles on his cake, his eyes darting hopefully to the door every few minutes, had been the final straw. Now as she watched Ethan meticulously pack his backpack, checking and double-checking that he had everything he needed for the day, Emily wondered if she had made the right choice. Was it better for Ethan to have a part-time father than no father at all? The question haunted her, especially on nights when Ethan would crawl into her bed, seeking comfort from nightmares he refused to describe. "Mom?" Ethan's voice broke through her reverie. "Do you think Dad remembers it's Family Day?" Emily knelt down, meeting her son's questioning gaze. "Your dad loves you very much, Ethan," she said, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time showing it. But that doesn't mean the love isn't there." Ethan nodded solemnly, his young face etched with a wisdom beyond his years. "I know," he said softly. "I just wish—" He trailed off. But Emily knew what he was thinking. It was the same wish she saw in his eyes every night as she tucked him into bed, the same silent prayer that seemed to hang in the air between them. A wish for wholeness, for the family they once were. As they walked hand in hand to the bus stop, Emily couldn't help but cast a glance over her shoulder, half expecting to see Jack's car pulling up to the curb. But the street remained empty, save for the other parents and children making their way to school. "Have a great day, sweetie," Emily said, planting a kiss on Ethan's forehead. "Remember, I'll be there this afternoon for Family Day." Ethan nodded, his backpack seeming almost too big for his small frame. As he climbed onto the bus, he turned back one last time, his eyes scanning the street. For a moment, Emily saw a flicker of disappointment cross his face, quickly replaced by a brave smile. "Bye, Mom," he called, waving as the bus doors closed. Emily waved back, her heart heavy. As the bus pulled away, she found herself making a silent wish of her own, a wish for Jack to realize what he was missing before it was too late. The Harmon Holdings office buzzed with the frenetic energy of a Wall Street trading floor. Phones rang incessantly, computer screens flickered with ever-changing numbers, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and even more expensive ambition. At the center of this maelstrom of commerce stood Jack Harmon, his commanding presence drawing every eye in the room. "Listen, Peterson," Jack barked into his phone, his free hand gesticulating wildly. "I don't care if they think the offer is too low. Tell them it's that or nothing. We're not in the charity business here." As he hung up, a thin smile of satisfaction played across his lips. Another deal closed, another company added to his ever-growing portfolio. This was where he thrived, in the cut and thrust of high-stakes business. Here, in this gleaming tower of glass and steel, Jack Harmon was king. But even kings can be toppled, and as Jack's assistant timidly approached his desk, he felt the first tremors of an earthquake that would shake his carefully constructed world to its core. "Mr. Harmon," the assistant said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I just wanted to remind you about the school event this afternoon. Family Day? It's on your calendar for 2 o'clock. For a moment, Jack stared at her blankly, as if she had suddenly started speaking in an alien tongue. Family Day. The words seemed to echo in his mind, growing louder with each repetition until they drowned out the noise of the office. "Right," he said finally, his voice gruff. "Family day, I remember." But did he? As his assistant scurried away, relieved to have delivered her message without incurring his infamous wrath, Jack found himself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. He had agreed to attend, hadn't he? A vague memory surfaced of a phone call with Emily, her voice tight with barely contained frustration, as she pleaded with him to show up for Ethan's sake. Jack glanced at his watch, a timepiece worth more than most people's annual salary, and felt a familiar sense of panic rising in his chest. How was he supposed to fit a school event into his packed schedule? There were calls to make, meetings to attend, deals to close. The very thought of stepping away from his empire, even for an afternoon, made his palms sweat. But then, unbidden, an image rose in his mind. Ethan's face, his eyes wide with hope and fear, scanning the crowd for a father who might not show. The memory hit Jack like a physical blow, leaving him breathless and disoriented. For the first time in years, Jack Harmon, the man who always knew his next move, found himself paralyzed with indecision. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built Harmon Holdings from the ground up, screamed at him to forget this foolishness and focus on what really mattered. But another voice, long silenced but suddenly deafening, whispered of missed opportunities and the fleeting nature of childhood. With a growl of frustration, Jack grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the office, ignoring the startled looks of his employees. He would go to this family day, if only to prove to Emily and to himself that he could. The drive to Ethan's school was a blur of conflicting emotions and half-formed thoughts. As his chauffeur navigated the busy streets of Los Angeles, Jack found himself staring out the window, seeing not the bustling city, but the ghosts of his past. He saw himself as a young man, full of dreams and ambition, with Emily by his side and the world at his feet. He saw Ethan as a toddler, taking his first steps across their living room floor, his chubby hands reaching out for his father's steady grasp. When had it all changed? When had the pursuit of success become more important than the love of his family? Jack couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but he knew with a sickening certainty that it had happened gradually, one missed dinner at a time, one forgotten promise after another. As the car pulled up to the curb outside Ethan's school, Jack felt a wave of panic wash over him. The playground was filled with families, mothers and fathers laughing with their children, grandparents doting on their grandkids, siblings chasing each other across the grass. It was a scene of domestic bliss that made Jack feel like an intruder in a foreign land. For a long moment he sat frozen in the back seat, his hand on the door handle but unable to make himself open it. What right did he have to be here? What could he possibly offer Ethan after years of absence and neglect? But then, through the tinted windows of the car, he caught sight of a small figure standing apart from the crowd. Ethan, his dark hair ruffled by the breeze, was scanning the arriving cars with an intensity that made Jack's heart ache. Even from a distance, he could see the hope and disappointment warring on his son's face. It was that sight, the sight of his son, alone and searching, that finally propelled Jack into action. With a deep breath, he pushed open the car door and stepped out into the sunlight. The noise of the playground seemed to dim as Jack made his way across the schoolyard. He was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered conversations that followed in his wake. No doubt many of these parents recognized him. Jack Harmon, the business tycoon, the man whose face graced the covers of financial magazines. But here, in this haven of childhood innocence, his wealth and status meant nothing. Ethan spotted him when he was halfway across the yard. For a moment, the boy's face lit up with a joy so pure it took Jack's breath away. But then, as if remembering himself, Ethan's expression clouded over, a mixture of wariness and hope that made him look far older than his 8 years. "Dad," Ethan said as Jack approached, his voice small and uncertain. "You came." The simple statement, devoid of the excitement a child should feel at seeing their father, hit Jack like a physical blow. He realized, with a clarity that was both brutal and necessary, just how much damage his absence had done. "Of course I came, buddy," Jack said, forcing a smile that felt foreign on his face. "It's family day, isn't it?" Ethan nodded solemnly, his eyes never leaving his father's face, as if afraid Jack might disappear if he looked away. "Mom's here too," he said, pointing towards a cluster of parents near the school building. Jack followed his son's gesture and felt his heart skip a beat. There, looking as beautiful and unattainable as a mirage, stood Emily. She was engaged in conversation with another mother, but her eyes kept darting towards Jack and Ethan, a mixture of surprise and apprehension evident in her gaze. As Jack stood there, awkwardly trying to think of something to say to the son he barely knew, he felt a tugging on his sleeve. He looked down to see Ethan gesturing towards a series of game stations set up around the playground. "Do you want to try the beanbag toss?" Ethan asked, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. For a moment, Jack was tempted to refuse. He was Jack Harmon, after all. He didn't do beanbag tosses or school carnivals. But the hopeful look in Ethan's eyes melted something inside him, a hard shell of indifference he hadn't even realized he'd built. "Sure, buddy," he heard himself say. "Lead the way." As they made their way across the playground, Jack became acutely aware of how out of place he looked in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. Parents in casual wear gave him curious glances, no doubt wondering what this businessman was doing at a school event. But Ethan seemed oblivious to the stares, his small hand firmly grasping Jack's as he led him to the beanbag toss station. For the first time in years, Jack felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with closing a deal or seeing his company's stock price rise. "Okay, Dad," Ethan said, handing him a small beanbag. "You have to try to get it in the hole. It's harder than it looks." Jack took the beanbag, its weight unfamiliar in his hand. He was used to wielding pens to sign multi-million-dollar contracts, not tossing toys at a painted board. But as he looked down at Ethan's expectant face, he knew that this simple game meant more than any business deal ever could. With a deep breath, Jack drew back his arm and let the beanbag fly. To his surprise, and Ethan's obvious delight, it sailed through the air in a perfect arc, landing squarely in the highest scoring hole. "Wow, Dad!" Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide with admiration. "That was amazing. How did you do that?" Jack felt a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, a genuine one this time. "Just lucky, I guess," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair. The gesture felt both foreign and familiar, like rediscovering a long-forgotten skill. As they continued to play, Jack found himself relaxing, the tension in his shoulders easing with each toss. He watched Ethan's face light up with each successful throw and felt a pang of regret for all the moments like this he had missed. From across the playground, Emily observed the scene with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. Seeing Jack here in this everyday setting felt surreal. The man tossing beanbags and laughing with their son seemed a world away from the cold, distant figure she had left 2 years ago. As she made her way towards them, Emily couldn't help but notice the change in Jack's demeanor. His suit jacket was slung over one arm, his tie loosened, and there was a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. "Hello, Jack," she said as she approached, her voice carefully neutral. Jack turned, and for a moment their eyes met. In that brief exchange, 1,000 unspoken words passed between them: regret, longing, uncertainty, and perhaps a flicker of hope. "Emily?" Jack nodded, his voice gruff but not unkind. "It's good to see you." Ethan looked between his parents, his young face a study in cautious optimism. "Mom, did you see? Dad got a bullseye on his first try." Emily smiled, reaching out to smooth Ethan's windswept hair. "That's wonderful, honey. Your dad always did have good aim." The double meaning wasn't lost on Jack, who winced slightly at the reminder of his past precision in hurting those he loved. But before he could respond, a loud whistle cut through the air. "All right, families," a cheerful voice called out. "It's time for our three-legged race. Everyone find a partner and make your way to the starting line." Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement. "Can we do it, Dad? Please?" Jack hesitated, glancing at his watch out of habit. A part of him was already thinking about the office, about the deals waiting to be closed, the calls to be made. But then he looked at Ethan's hopeful face, at Emily's questioning gaze, and made a decision that would alter the course of his life. "Sure, buddy," he said, surprising even himself with the enthusiasm in his voice. "Let's show them how it's done." As Jack knelt down to tie his leg to Ethan's, he caught Emily's eye. She was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read, part surprise, part wariness, and something else, something that made his heart beat a little faster. "Wish us luck?" he asked, the question laden with meaning beyond the simple request. Emily's lips curved into a small smile. "Good luck," she said softly. "Both of you." As Jack and Ethan made their way to the starting line, wobbling and laughing as they tried to coordinate their steps, Jack felt something shift inside him. Here, on this sunny schoolyard, tied to his son and surrounded by the joyful chaos of family day, he felt more alive than he had in years. The race began, and as Jack and Ethan stumbled and hopped their way down the field, he realized that he was chasing something far more valuable than any business deal. He was chasing a second chance at being a father, at being a family man. They didn't win the race. In fact, they came in near last, collapsing in a heap of laughter just short of the finish line. But as Jack lay there on the grass, Ethan's giggles ringing in his ears, and the warmth of the sun on his face, he felt like a winner for the first time in a very long time. As they untied their legs, Jack caught sight of Emily standing at the sidelines. She was clapping and laughing, her eyes shining with an emotion he hadn't seen directed at him in years. In that moment, Jack Harmon, the ruthless businessman, the man who had sacrificed his family on the altar of success, made a silent vow. He would win them back, not with money or power or grand gestures, but with time, with presence, with the kind of love that showed up day after day, no matter what. It wouldn't be easy. Years of neglect had left deep scars. But as he helped Ethan to his feet, Jack knew with absolute certainty that it would be worth it. The rest of Family Day passed in a blur of games, laughter, and tentative reconnections. Jack found himself fully immersed in the activities, his phone forgotten in his pocket, the constant hum of business deals fading into the background. As the event wound down and families began to disperse, Jack felt a peculiar reluctance to leave. The thought of returning to his empty mansion, to the cold world of profit margins and corporate takeovers, suddenly seemed unbearable. "Dad?" Ethan's voice broke through his thoughts. "Do you have to go back to work now?" The question, so simple yet so loaded, hung in the air between them. Jack looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw the years of longing, of disappointment, of hope deferred written in those young eyes. "Not today, buddy," Jack heard himself say, the words feeling right in a way he couldn't explain. "How about we go get some ice cream instead?" Ethan's face lit up with joy, but he quickly tempered his excitement, casting a questioning glance at his mother. "Can we, Mom? Can Dad come with us?" Emily hesitated, her eyes meeting Jack's over Ethan's head. In that moment, Jack silently pleaded with her, trying to convey all the things he couldn't say out loud. His regret, his desire to make amends, his newfound understanding of what truly mattered in life. After what felt like an eternity, Emily nodded. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea," she said, her voice soft but steady. As they walked towards the parking lot, Ethan chattering excitedly between them, Jack felt a sense of rightness settle over him. He knew the road ahead would be long and challenging. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. But as he watched Emily smile at something Ethan said, as he felt the warmth of his son's hand in his own, Jack knew that this moment, this family, was worth fighting for. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Jack Harmon looked forward to it with hope in his heart and a determination to be the husband and father his family deserved. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change to the Harmon household, or households as they still were. Jack, true to the silent vow he had made on that sunlit schoolyard, began the arduous task of rebuilding the bridges he had so carelessly burned. It started small, a text message to Emily, asking about Ethan's day at school, a call to his son before bedtime just to say goodnight. These gestures, once so foreign to Jack, began to feel as natural as breathing. At Harmon Holdings, whispers began to circulate. The fearsome Jack Harmon, known for his relentless pursuit of success at any cost, was changing. He still drove hard bargains and made shrewd decisions, But there was a new dimension to him. He left the office at reasonable hours, declined late-night meetings, and was even seen smiling, actually smiling, at a photo on his desk. For Jack, each day became a delicate balance between the demands of his empire and the pull of his heart. He found himself looking forward to weekends with an eagerness he hadn't felt since childhood. Saturdays became sacred, time reserved solely for Ethan. They started with simple outings, trips to the park, afternoons at the movies, lazy days spent building elaborate Lego structures. At first, there was an awkwardness between them, the weight of lost years hanging heavy in the air. But slowly, as surely as spring follows winter, a warmth began to grow. Ethan, for his part, approached this new version of his father with cautious optimism. He had been disappointed too many times before to fully trust that this change was permanent. But with each promise kept, each moment of undivided attention, the walls around his young heart began to crumble. One Saturday, as they sat on a park bench sharing a bag of popcorn, Ethan asked the question that had been burning in his mind for weeks. "Dad," he said, his voice small but steady, "are you and Mom going to get back together?" Jack felt his heart constrict. He looked at his son, saw the mixture of hope and fear in those eyes, so like Emily's, and knew he had to tread carefully. "I don't know, buddy," he said honestly. "Your mom and I, we have a lot to work through. But I want you to know that no matter what happens between us, we both love you very much. That will never change." Ethan nodded, seeming to mull this over. "But you're trying, right? To make things better?" Jack felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. He put his arm around Ethan's shoulders, drawing him close. "Yes, Ethan," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "I'm trying. I promise you. I'm trying with everything I've got." As Ethan leaned into him, Jack silently renewed his vow. He would keep trying, keep showing up, keep putting his family first, no matter what it cost him. Emily, meanwhile, watched this transformation with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The Jack she saw now, the man who showed up on time for school events, who called just to check in, who seemed genuinely interested in the minutiae of their daily lives, was the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. But she was wary. She had been burned before, had watched as the man she loved was slowly consumed by ambition and greed. Could people really change so fundamentally? And even if they could, was it enough to mend the deep fissures in their relationship? Despite her reservations, Emily couldn't deny the positive impact Jack's presence was having on Ethan. Her son smiled more, laughed easier. The sadness that had become a constant companion in his eyes was slowly being replaced by a cautious joy. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, she received a text from Jack. It was a photo of him and Ethan at a baseball game, both grinning widely, their faces smeared with ice cream. The caption read, "Wish you were here." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. She stared at the photo, at the happiness radiating from both their faces, and felt a longing so intense it took her breath away. She missed this, missed them as a family, missed the easy laughter and shared moments. But could she trust it? Could she open her heart again, knowing the pain that could follow? As if sensing her turmoil, her phone buzzed with another message from Jack. "I know I have a lot to make up for, but I'm in this for the long haul, Emily. Whatever it takes." Emily closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. She didn't respond to the message, not yet. But as she returned to preparing dinner, she felt something shift inside her. A tiny seed of hope, long dormant, beginning to sprout. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the Harmon family inched closer to something resembling wholeness. Jack's transformation was not without its challenges. There were times when the siren call of work threatened to pull him back into old habits. Deals that required late nights, overseas trips that promised substantial rewards. But each time Jack found himself making a choice, and each time he chose his family. It wasn't always easy. There were arguments with Emily, moments of frustration when the weight of past hurts threatened to overshadow the progress they had made. There were times when Ethan tested boundaries, pushing back against this new version of his father, as if expecting him to disappear at any moment. But through it all, Jack remained steadfast. He showed up day after day, not just physically but emotionally. He listened when Ethan talked about his fears and dreams. He engaged in long, sometimes painful conversations with Emily, working through years of resentment and misunderstanding. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dynamics began to shift. Family dinners, once a rarity, became a regular occurrence. Jack found himself looking forward to these simple meals more than any business dinner he had ever attended. The sound of Ethan's laughter, the warmth of Emily's smile, these became the measures of his success. As summer approached, Jack made a decision that sent shockwaves through the business world. He announced that he would be taking a sabbatical from Harmon Holdings, stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on his family. The news was met with disbelief by his colleagues and competitors alike. Jack Harmon stepping away from the empire he had built? It was unthinkable. But for Jack, the decision felt right in a way that no business move ever had. As he packed up his office, his eyes fell on the photo of Emily and Ethan that had become his touchstone over the past months. He realized that for the first time in years, he was truly excited about the future, not because of potential profits or business prospects, but because of the promise of time with the people he loved most. The night before his sabbatical officially began, Jack found himself standing in the backyard of Emily's house, their old house. Ethan was inside, getting ready for bed, and Emily stood beside him, both of them gazing up at the star-filled sky. "Are you sure about this, Jack?" Emily asked softly. "Stepping away from your company? It's a big decision." Jack turned to look at her, really look at her. In the soft moonlight, she was as beautiful as the day he had first fallen in love with her. But there was something more now, a strength, a wisdom that the years had gifted her. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "Emily, I know I have a lot to make up for. I know that trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. But I want you to know that I'm committed to this, to us, to our family, for the long haul." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it held the weight of forgiveness, of hope, of a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. "One day at a time, Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll take it one day at a time." As they stood there, hand in hand under the vast expanse of stars, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But he also knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that this moment, this family, this love, was worth fighting for. And fight he would. Not with the cutthroat tactics of the boardroom, but with patience, with kindness, with the kind of steady love that shows up day after day, year after year. Jack Harmon, once defined by his business acumen, was redefining himself as a husband, a father, a man who understood that true wealth lay not in bank accounts, but in the hearts of those we hold dear. As they turned to go inside, where Ethan waited for his goodnight kiss, Jack felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. He had been given a second chance, an opportunity to rewrite his story, and this time, he vowed, he would get it right. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jack Harmon looked forward to it with a heart full of hope and a soul at peace. As spring blossomed into summer, the Harmon family embarked on a journey of rediscovery. Jack's sabbatical from Harmon Holdings meant that for the first time in years, his schedule was wide open. No more rushed breakfasts or missed dinners, no more choosing between a business meeting and a school play. For Jack, it was both exhilarating and terrifying. The first few weeks were a period of adjustment for everyone. Jack, accustomed to the frenetic pace of the business world, found himself at loose ends. He woke early out of habit, reaching for a phone that no longer buzzed with urgent messages. Emily, used to managing the household and Ethan's schedule on her own, had to learn to make space for Jack's involvement. Ethan, perhaps, adapted the most quickly. For him, having his father present and engaged was a dream come true. He reveled in the attention, soaking up every moment like a sponge. As the days grew longer and warmer, the Harmons fell into a new rhythm. Mornings were spent over leisurely breakfasts, planning the day ahead. Jack discovered a talent for making pancakes, much to Ethan's delight. Emily found herself smiling more, the tension that had been a constant companion for so long slowly easing from her shoulders. They embarked on adventures big and small. Weekends were filled with trips to the beach, hikes in the nearby mountains, and explorations of local parks. Jack, who had once viewed time away from work as a waste, now found himself treasuring these moments. The sight of Ethan's face lighting up as he caught his first wave, the sound of Emily's laughter as they attempted to build a sandcastle together, these became the highlights of his days. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of tension, old wounds that hadn't fully healed. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, Jack would feel the pull of his old life. He'd find himself reaching for his laptop, itching to check on the company's stock prices or the status of ongoing deals. In these moments, he had to remind himself of what truly mattered, of the promises he had made to himself and his family. Emily, too, struggled at times. Years of independence had made her wary of relying on Jack again. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if this change was permanent, if she could truly open her heart again without fear of being hurt. But for every moment of doubt, there were a dozen moments of joy. Like the evening they spent stargazing in the backyard, Ethan nestled between them as Jack pointed out constellations. Or the afternoon they spent baking cookies, the kitchen a mess of flour and laughter. Slowly but surely, they were rebuilding their family, one shared moment at a time. As summer reached its peak, Jack surprised Emily and Ethan with news of a family vacation. Not to some luxurious resort or exotic location, but to a simple cabin by a lake, much like the one Jack's family had visited when he was a child. The week they spent at the cabin became a turning point. Away from the distractions of their everyday lives, surrounded by the beauty of nature, the Harmons reconnected in ways they hadn't in years. They fished off the dock, Ethan squealing with delight when he caught his first trout. They took long walks in the woods, Jack and Emily holding hands as Ethan ran ahead, exploring. In the evenings, they sat around a campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. It was on one of these evenings, with Ethan fast asleep in the cabin, that Jack and Emily had the conversation they'd both been avoiding. Jack said softly, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. I know I've said it before, but I'm sorry. For everything. For losing sight of what really matters. For putting my ambition before our family. Emily was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I want to believe you, Jack. I want to trust that this change is real, that it will last. But I'm scared. I'm scared of opening my heart again, of letting you in only to have it all fall apart. Jack reached out, taking her hand in his. I understand, he said, and I know I have a lot to prove. But Emily, I promise you, I'm in this for the long haul. You and Ethan, you're my world now. Everything else, the company, the deals, the money, it means nothing without you. Emily turned to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. One day at a time? She asked, echoing her words from months ago. Jack nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. One day at a time, he agreed. As they sat there, hand in hand under the vast canopy of stars, both felt a shift. It wasn't a dramatic moment of reconciliation, no sweeping declarations or grand gestures. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they'd been on and the path that lay ahead. A shared commitment to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep choosing each other and their family. The rest of the summer passed in a blur of golden days and warm nights. Jack extended his sabbatical, much to the consternation of his board of directors. But for the first time in his life, he was certain he was exactly where he needed to be. As autumn approached and thoughts turned to the upcoming school year, the Harmons faced a new challenge. Emily's lease on her house was coming to an end, and decisions needed to be made about living arrangements. It was Ethan who broached the subject one evening over dinner. Mom, he said, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. Are we going to move back home with Dad? The question hung in the air, loaded with hope and uncertainty. Jack and Emily exchanged a look, years of shared history passing between them in that silent moment. "Well," Emily said slowly, "what do you think about that idea, Ethan?" Ethan's face lit up. "I think it would be awesome. We could be together all the time, like a real family again." Jack felt his heart swell at his son's words. He looked at Emily, trying to gauge her reaction. "It's up to you, Em," he said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support it." Emily took a deep breath, her eyes moving from Jack to Ethan and back again. In that moment, she saw not just the mistakes of the past, but the possibility of the future. She saw lazy Sunday mornings and family game nights, shared meals and shared dreams. She saw a life rebuilt, stronger for having been broken. "I think," she said, a smile slowly spreading across her face, "that might be a wonderful idea." The joy that erupted in the room was palpable. Ethan leaped from his chair, wrapping his arms around both his parents. Jack felt tears pricking at his eyes as he held his family close. In the weeks that followed, the Harmons began the process of becoming a unified family once again. It wasn't always easy. There were discussions about boundaries and expectations, about balancing work and family life. Jack made the decision to return to Harmon Holdings, but with a new perspective and new priorities. He restructured the company, delegating more responsibilities and implementing family-friendly policies. He made it clear that while the business was important, it would no longer come at the expense of his personal life. As Emily and Ethan moved back into the family home, there was a sense of coming full circle. But this wasn't a return to the past. Instead, it was the beginning of something new. A family forged in the fires of adversity, stronger and more resilient for the challenges they had faced. On the evening after the move was complete, as they sat together on the patio watching the sunset, Jack felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He looked at Emily, her face softened by the golden light, and at Ethan, curled up contentedly between them. This, he realized, was true success. Not the numbers in a bank account or the size of a business empire, but the love of family, the joy of shared moments, the peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Jack Harmon, once defined by his ruthless pursuit of wealth, found himself redefined by love. He had been given a second chance, and he vowed to make the most of it, one day at a time. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges, of course. Life was never without its obstacles. But Jack knew that together, as a family, they could face anything. And as night fell on the Harmon household, bringing with it the soft sounds of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves, a sense of peace settled over them all. They were home, in every sense of the word. And that, Jack realized, was the greatest success of all. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Harmon household bustled with activity on a warm Saturday morning. In the kitchen, Jack stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the ease of long practice. Emily moved around him, setting the table and pouring orange juice. Their easy synchronicity spoke of years of shared mornings and mutual understanding. 13-year-old Ethan bounded down the stairs, his footsteps thundering through the house. "Is breakfast ready?" he called, his voice cracking slightly, a reminder of the changes puberty was bringing. "Just about," Jack replied, sliding the last pancake onto a platter. "Why don't you go get your sister?" Ethan nodded, turning to head back upstairs. "Lily!" he called. "Breakfast time!" A moment later, the patter of small feet announced the arrival of 5-year-old Lily, her dark curls bouncing as she ran into the kitchen. "Daddy!" she squealed, launching herself into Jack's arms. Jack scooped her up, planting a kiss on her forehead. "Good morning, Princess," he said, his voice soft with love. As they settled around the table, Jack took a moment to look at his family. Emily, her hair streaked with a few strands of silver, her eyes bright with contentment. Ethan, growing taller by the day, his face a perfect blend of both his parents. And little Lily, a surprise blessing who had come into their lives 3 years after their reconciliation, completing their family in ways they hadn't known they needed. The past 5 years hadn't been without their challenges. There had been arguments and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, they had remained committed to each other, to the family they were building. Harmon Holdings had undergone its own transformation. Under Jack's new leadership style, it had become known not just for its financial success, but for its commitment to work-life balance and family-friendly policies. Jack had found a way to balance his business acumen with his role as a husband and father, and in doing so, had created a company culture that valued people as much as profits. As they ate breakfast, sharing stories and plans for the day ahead, Jack felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This, he knew, was his greatest achievement. Not the business empire he had built, not the wealth he had accumulated, but this family, this love, this life they had created together. Later that evening, as Jack and Emily sat on the porch swing, watching Ethan teach Lily how to catch fireflies in the backyard, Emily leaned her head on Jack's shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The excitement of the business world, the thrill of closing big deals?" Jack was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Not for a second," he said. "Everything I need, everything that truly matters, is right here." Emily tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. The love that passed between them was tangible, a testament to the journey they had taken and the life they had rebuilt. As night fell and the fireflies danced in the gathering darkness, the Harmon family came together, drawn by the invisible threads of love and commitment that bound them. Jack Harmon, once driven by ambition and the pursuit of wealth, had found a different kind of richness, one measured not in dollars and cents, but in laughter, in shared moments, in the quiet joy of a family united. And as he held his wife close and watched his children play, Jack knew with absolute certainty that he was at last truly and completely home.